You're all very, very welcome. So this is Dr. Gerry Morgan. He's our PRO, an acting secretary, an acting chair for tonight, acting Irish now, and he's going to give the talk. Believe it or not, on genealogy of his wife's family, Pat, and it's called Some Shepherd Family History. So,
thank you very much, and you're very welcome, and apologies for the late start, and it's the first meeting of the year and we have teething problems. What we're hoping to do this year is to encourage members or anybody to do a little bit of research on their family history and to build up the courage to share it with us. Now, I've got a long wandering talk tonight because I tend to wander when I do, but a talk could be 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We could have a few people on the night together. But it would be, you'd be surprised what sort of weird stories you'd come up with from some of your ancestors, like in this one tonight. There's some interesting facts on it. So I'm just starting the ball rolling. We have the next month's meeting almost planned as someone coming in, but then after that, we'll be trying to encourage people to get up and say something about it. I'm going to use a PowerPoint presentation. If anybody would like to help us doing it, it would be good. The nice thing about PowerPoint is you can show original things like census reports, marriage certificates, and that. And I have a few of those to show tonight. So if you bear with me a second, I'm going to, and hello to people on Zoom, I'm going to turn off my picture and share the screen here if I can eventually do that. Okay, and what I want to get is PowerPoint, which is down here, I think. And I want to maximize that. And then I want to play it from the start. And hopefully we will be in business. There we are. Thanks. Okay, so the talk of the title of the talk is Some Shepherd Family History, and you're very welcome. Let me set the scene. So I've been interested in my own family history because of a granduncle who nobody knew anything about. That's what got me started. And I've also done some work on Pat's family history. Now, a lot of it, most of it isn't new, because if you look at, she's down here, our parents were Jarlath Holt from near Headford, and one of his brothers, Father Eugene Holt, a Franciscan priest, would come home from Rome every summer and spend 6 weeks talking to neighbours, talking to friends, family, visiting churches, knocking at old registers, going to graveyards. 1960s, pre-digital, and really built up a very good picture of the whole family history of his life. Pat's mother, Bessie Crowe, was born in Monaghan and ended up back in Galway. She had an equal interest in family history, and she has quite a good record as well. And my involvement was just to take their pre-digital records and work through them and find out where there were little errors and bits and pieces, and add bits and pieces to it. So it's this side of the family I want to work on. Going back a generation, her grandfather was Church of Ireland. He married Mary Kine from Kiltroe. That family is very well known. They're from Monaghan. His parents were John Crowe, Eliza Shepherd. His parents they were married in Limerick, came from Clare, from the Church of Ireland. He was a schoolmaster in the Church of Ireland school there in 1836. He came. The thing of interest is Eliza Shepherd. For a family history that's very well researched, there's absolutely nothing known about her, except Bessie said that she came from Norfolk. And that's amazing because they lived in a house together for 6 years. She died in 1916, Bessie was born in 1911, and didn't know anything else about her at all. That's the only thing we had. We have a nice photograph of her because our daughter went to England, married a photographer, and they came. Arthur C. Gundry, that's why I've got this, a chain studio sandwich. That's for sometime between 1912 when they got married in 1916 when she died. Husband John Crowe was a steward for the French estate in Monaghan. They lived in Monaghan village at about 1890 or so, bought Curran House. So the opposite end of the French estate to Monaghan village. There. So to begin the search, I found the marriage record for John Crowe and Eliza Shepherd, who were married in Monaghan Church of Ireland in 1872. 1872, bachelor spinster. The husband was a steward, lived in Monterey. Thomas Crowe, father, he was an underage, but he was still a school teacher as well. Eliza Shepherd, father John Shepherd, no profession, no occupation, which is unusual. Even if the person was dead, they generally wrote something down about it. What's also interesting is the witnesses, two males. Charles Tully, the lower one, was a large landowner, about 100 acres or so, lived by there, possibly a friend of John Crowe. But Atchison French was the other guy, and he would have been the big wagga at the time. He ran the Monterey estate, but his absentee brother, older brother Robert, who was a British diplomat. So why was he on the list? What I'm wondering, or what I suggest, is that perhaps Eliza worked coming from Norfolk. Why was she in Monterey? Did she work in some capacity in the household in Monterey Castle? And she would have been 30-ish about at this stage. Was he acting as a guardian employee? That's why he was there. Her age wasn't, just down as full age on the record, but her death record says she was born about 1842. So she just turned 30 or thereabouts. So that family, John Crowe and Eliza Shepherd, there's Pat's grandfather, married to Mary Tyne. There were 3 other sisters who didn't marry. One, Charlotte Crowe, went to England and married. So we knew that she married this photographer, Arthur Thunder. So I decided to go looking for English records. Now, I've used Ancestry.com for most of my work. It's not a free thing, you've got to pay for it, but it's the only way to get into to find any record, really.
Could I ask you a question earlier to go? I noticed there was a Catholic marriage or a Catholic church. I think the previous
here, that's Catholic. This is church. So Thomas Crowe married Mary Tyne.
Did you have Church of Ireland earlier?
That's for the parents. That's for the previous generation.
Yeah, so there's a change.
My grandmother was Catholic.
Yeah, so
married a Catholic church for that.
So interestingly, I can't find the official marriage record on the civil record. I must go and see if it's they got married about 1910. See if there's anything in the church record. It's unusual. Maybe because it was a mixed marriage, it was kept quiet, and the priest even for that didn't find the record. But they did get married because they were both avid beekeepers, and in the Irish Beekeeping Journal, there's a photograph of a report on the marriage, so we know that they're married. Anyway, I went looking for Charlotte Crowe. We had her granddaughter, Victoria Stevenson, visiting last week, my second cousin, who said the lore was that she ran away or left home at 15, went to Dublin and trained as a pastry cook. I can see her in 1901 census living with her first cousin, no occupation. And after that, I went looking in England, and I find her as a waitress in a hotel in Bournemouth on the south coast. Now, it is her age is off. She's underestimating her age, but she says she was born in Abbott, County Galway, which is sort of the electoral district, the area. And her father, his father was no, but the Abbott County Galway was it. 1912, she married Arthur Gundry in London, and that's the marriage record. It's a Church of Ireland marriage record. Now, what's interesting here, her father's John Crowe, a farmer, and age she underestimates because she's older than the spouse. Witness Clement Shepherd, same last name as the mother, but what really helped and solved the problem is that instead of putting down London or even the street, she put down the house number where she was living, 48 Lausanne Road in Hornsey in London. That was unusual, but that really made a difference to it. So what did I do? That was 1912. So I went looking for the 1911 census in England, and I find that Clement Shepherd living at 48 Lausanne Road. So that's the guy. Married 35 years, age 65. So he wasn't Charlotte's first cousin, as I thought it might have been. Much closer in age to the mother, the infamous Eliza Shepherd. 2 children born, not with them, but still alive. Retired policeman. And on a separate record, I can't find his death record, but I can see the probate on his will by 1916. One of his daughters, I haven't put it down there, was the administrator of the will, so I think it's the right person. In fact, I can prove it later on. The British system has extensive intact census records from 1841 up to 1921 available. The last one is through a competitive ancestry type website, and you have to pay for it. The other things you can get on all of them. And I can use that to follow them right back to when he was a nipper. If we look at the 1881 data in particular, you can see the family shepherd is there. Now the spelling is a little bit different. It's A-R-D rather than E-R-D. But that's a minor thing. What they give is the name, the head of family, the age, what they do. He's a police constable in 1881, but where they were born, Norfolk County, Norwich. Their son was born in London. The mother is there, Mary Shepherd. No, where's Mary? Mary Shepherd is there. Mother, 74, born in Moulton, Norfolk, a village about 10 miles outside Norwich. Should be Moulton. So I think I've got the 2 children, as he said, 2 daughters. So I think I've got the right person. Policeman. So I used the census records to work right the way back to 1841, and I think I've got the right person. If you look at the age, dropping down by 10 years all the time. Policeman, he gets married in 1875 to Susan Duffy in the parish church. His occupation then was a saddler. This was in London, so he moved to London when he was 30. He put his father down as a warehouse man. That I don't understand. Before that, 1871, he was a harness maker, I suppose the same as a saddler, living in a village outside Norfolk. Then 1861, living with his family in Norwich at 15. In 1851, he was scholar at age 5.
Wow.
So it probably is the right person. Looking good. So this is all inferred from just looking through the census records. So his family, Clement Shepherd's family, 1861, living with his father, John Shepherd, same name as the father for Eliza Shepherd, the silk weaver, Mary Shepherd, mother, a laundress, so they weren't wealthy by any means, and his sister Eliza, with the right age, born by 1843, a dressmaker, and a niece. In the earlier census, same parents, same sister, but a brother, in fact, a half-brother, living with them, who was a shoemaker. Now, none of them are labourers, and I find for most of the people in Norwich, none of them are labourers. They all are doing something else. Bootmaker is the other main thing. Lots of weavers, some bootmakers, some troopers, and some weavers. So, we'll have proof later on that it's the right family. So just to show points of interest, the distances, London here we all know, Norwich up here close to the continent, where she was in the hotel, Eliza. This will be important later, Portsmouth. And when Charlotte got married to the photographer, the first place they lived in was this Sandwich. Okay, just to put that in. So John Shepherd's family, the father, Eliza and Clement's father. John Shepherd married Mary Thurlow in 1841. Both of them were widowed. They had 2 children, Eliza and Clement. The mother, Mary, had been previously married to Thurlow. She had, I can see, 2 daughters. I don't know, there might be more, but I can see 2 daughters. And a mother on the census report, the 1841 census report, that's Margaret. I can see what I think is a birth record, but no father mentioned it, but the name is Mary there, which seems to be that person, so whatever. John Shepherd, the father, previously married to Elizabeth Webster, 9 children, including that half-brother William, who was on the census at the right age. His parents, looking through various records that I'll mention in a moment, were William Shepherd, turns out he was a weaver as well, and Eliza Blinkenthorpe Waters. That could have been the mother's name of the father's name. Now, one of the 9 children, a brother of John, was Ralph Harvey Shepherd, an unusual name and a very fortuitous unusual name because it makes it easy to follow, to make the story interesting later on. And this Hardy appears on and on through records. So we can fill in the family tree that we started off with, and to some extent the story's over, but it's not. So we've got John Shepherd, or Liza Shepherd, marrying John Crowe, with a brother, Clement Shepherd, loads of half-brothers, that's too many to put in. Parents, John Shepherd married Carmen, his parents and mother, and I don't know what the problem there. So that's almost over, and that's where I almost stop. Let me just mention one or two of the records that help me fill in the details there. Church of England records go back to the Middle Ages when the Normans came, because they were basically peaceful. There was nobody raping and pillaging the country, burning everything down. They had the Reformation, but they kept records. So in theory, we could keep going back to them, but that's too difficult for distance. So this is a baptismal record for Ralph Hardy Shepherd. Funny name that's of interest. So he was born, the baptismal record was really the official church record till about the middle 1800s. Baptized the 15th of January, and they sometimes note the birth date, 7th of January. Son of William and Elizabeth, late Elizabeth Blenkinsop. So unusually they gave the mother's maiden name. Now that's only half her name, because on some of the record there's Blenkinthorpe, Waters, and so on. But so that gives the mother's maiden name sometimes. If you look at one of this Ralph Hardy Shepherd's son's baptismal records later on, they've gone to a formalize it a bit. So they put in when he was baptized, and when he was born. So he was baptized December of 1832, but he was born, I think it's October, it looks like January. April 24. Parent, Ralph Hardy Shepherd, someone we talk a bit more about, and Mary. Doesn't give her a maiden name, just gives the family there, but says he was a weaver. So so John Shepherd was a weaver, his brother Ralph Hardy Shepherd. Weaver, 7 children, names Ralph Hardy Shepherd, Frederick Hardy Shepherd, this all comes on. The daughter Matilda Mary Shepherd, we come back to her as well. She's an important part of the later story. And that was the end of it, except I happened across this record. On Ancestry, when you hit a record, it gives a whole lot of suggestions of other ones. And suddenly, five cases started appearing. And at first I didn't know one person. And I happened to look. And because one of them was called Ralph Hardy Shepherd, there are not too many people that take that from them. So, you know what? I didn't turn that.
I didn't turn on the barcode.
Okay. All right. So 1831. Turns out they were both arrested and tried for highway robbery. And violent assault.
Escaped. That's when he went to the door.
They were found guilty and sentenced to be hanged. That wasn't unusual. We'll have a look in a minute. No. Okay. So, a little bit of background. Norwich was the second biggest city in England at this time. A thriving textile industry since the Middle Ages. Lots of foreign influence there. And Flemish weavers, Huguenots coming. In 1838 census, there were 5,000 weavers. Wow. At about 1800, there were over 10,000, so it was actually in decline. They had economic difficulties. They had competition from Yorkshire, where textile was being mechanized. And even in the villages outside of Norwich, they were undercutting the wages of the weavers. And so they formed a committee, like a union, to try and ward off competition. As well as that, there was a lot of agricultural unrest. In 1829, 1830, there was a very poor harvest. So there was a lot of hunger about, and farmers were reducing wages for the labourers, and there was a lot of mechanization coming in. So there was a lot of unrest. Groups were going around intimidating, burning haystacks and the like. So it wasn't a great time. So the events that are of interest to the shepherds. January 25th, 1831, Charles Green, a carrier, bought yarn and silk in Norwich and carted it home, was accosted on the highway by 6 disguised men, beaten, had vitriol, which is sulfuric acid, poured into his ear, it meant business, and all his stuff was stolen, and he was hospitalized. Now, as it happened, the next day, John Shepherd went to somebody to sell him what he said was some excess yarn. But this was the person who had sold yarn to Green the day before, and he claimed that it was the same yarn. And John Shepherd was arrested later that evening. His brother was arrested later, mostly because they had both spoken out. Now, the brother was educated. It says in the trial proceedings he was educated and was secretary of this intimidation committee. And because they had spoken out, he got arrested too. And as well, for an agricultural incident, there was a guy called Richard Knockholes, who happened to be a weaver and on the committee, but got himself mixed up with the agricultural riots. He was arrested at the same time as well. And they were sent to trial. They were arrested in January. The next circuit court would have been at the Lenten Assizes in Norwich, 24th of March, at Einstein. Calendar of the prisoners now in custody of the sheriff of the said county for a trial at the Lenten Assizes to be held in Norwich, said county, Thursday, 24th day of March, because the Honourable Sir Stephen Gaisley Knight, one of the justices of the Law King bench, and the Honourable Sir Edward Hall Alderson Knight, one of the other justices of the bench, and so on. Felons for trial. Now, Gaisley was a well-recognised judge and was actually quite fair, and it was his interference that got them off in the end, or his concern. I always have pictures of judges drinking wine and sleeping through trials, but actually it's not true in this case. There's an extract from the felons later down the list. The last two are the two Hardys. There were 18 people for trial. John Shepherd, age 31, I just split up the lines, you can see, committed February 26th, the day after the thing, by these two guys. His brother committed, there was a tent at assizes about a week earlier, so he was only recently arrested. And the charge was charged with having, on the night of the 25th of January last, assaulted and wounded Charles Green of Tesburg and stolen a quantity of yarn. I mentioned this guy Knockholes. There's a bunch of people arrested for having willfully set fire to haystacks, 2 barns, and a stable. The sentences are actually written down here. For this group up here, one turns King's evidence, one was acquitted. The other 2 guys there, these 2 guys were sentenced to death. And in fact, up the list, almost everybody up the list was sentenced to death for breaking into a house and stealing. There were severe times. But I've read another article that says that Knockholes, these groups were almost one of the last groups of people executed for a non-murderous crime. So it was changing. So more events at the trial. They were seen until the 26th, as far as I can out. The jury took 30 minutes to find them guilty, pleaded for mercy because they couldn't be certain that the yarn was the stolen yarn. And the judge in fairness said, look, you can't really do that. That's the only evidence again. And go back and think again. Took 2 minutes to go back and say, no, they're guilty. And the judge really had no option but to sentence them to the prescribed punishment. Knockholes was found guilty of this crime. He was executed then in April the 9th, but before his execution, he admitted to having been involved in the assault on Green and said that the shepherds weren't involved. And the shepherds wrote a letter of appeal to the king, and there was a lot of disquiet, apparently. It was in the papers, there was a lot of disquiet in Norwich about this. So they wrote, that's the original letter from the Home Office files that you can get on Ancestry. You can't see much there, but I've blown up a little bit of it. Let me read out the first bit there. To the King's Most Excellent Majesty, the humble petition of Hardy Shepherd and John Shepherd, prisoners now on the sentence of death in the Castle of Norwich. And it goes on for 2 pages. But it concludes, your petitioners solemnly protesting their innocence and denying the crime of which they've been convicted, Most humbly pray your majesty to direct an investigation to be made into the circumstances of their case, and that your majesty will extend your royal mercy to them, and your petitioners will ever pray. And I think that's their original signature down at the very bottom. Now, I'd say they didn't write the letter, I'd say they had someone with a bit of legal knowledge, because it's quite a stylized letter, and foreign letter. Let me just keep up with the notes there. Now, as well as that, the people in the in Norwich also petitioned. So this is a letter from parishioners in the parish that we're in. Now, Norfolk's a big city, but it had something like, it said it had 52 parishes and 365 pubs. And it goes back to the Middle Ages. So the parishes, Church of England parishes, were quite small, I think. And they wrote, and again, it's the original. You can see that, you can see a blot on that, and you can see the sort of bond, the bond on it. So it's the regular one, and the signatures at the end. And I can read out that letter there. So we, the clergymen, and some of the principal parishioners of the parish of St. Clement's, Norwich, being the parish in which the unfortunate men John and Hardy Shepherd.
Go back before they can see it.
Okay, oh yeah, yeah. And he doesn't use Ralph, he obviously used the middle name Hardy as his first name. Now under sentence of death. Now under sentence of death. Lately resided, having this evening met at the parish church of St. Clement's aforesaid, and having heard the statements of the several parties, and fully and attentively considered the evidence offered in favour of an alibi in the trial of the said John and Hardy Shepherd, together with the statements of James, that's the last word down there, and it continues there. So James Smith and John Salter, persons known to us as highly deserving credit, we feel strongly persuaded that neither of the prisoners were among the men who committed the inhuman and barbarous assault upon Charles Green. And we do therefore most humbly entreat the learned judge who presided at the trial again to take the case of the said John and Hardy Shepherd into his most merciful consideration, given her under our hands this 21st day of March. So he actually wrote it 31st, I should put it in 31st day of March. Samuel Tillow, curate, Thomas Webster, churchwarden, and that. So in fairness, it generated some interest and activity. And reading through letters that are available on Ancestry from the Home Office, the British Home Office files at the time, 16th of April, so they wrote the 31st of March. Now, why they weren't executed, I don't know, because Knockholes was executed on the 7th, early April. So maybe even the jailers were unhappy with it. I'm surprised they were still alive at that stage. But on the 16th of April, a letter from the Home Secretary, Viscount Melbourne, to one of the aldermen, I think, in Norwich, directing a stay of execution. Don't hang them yet. Okay? The judge, Gaisley, wrote to Melbourne. He looked at the case and said, well, at this stage he felt they were still guilty, but hanging was too severe. So he recommended transportation for life for Ralph, Hardy Shepherd, and for 7 years for John. So in front of that, they were moved to Portsmouth, where were appointed on the south coast and imprisoned in a prison hall at Lothian. Now these were old Navy warships that couldn't sail anymore, and they were just lined up in the harbour and used as prisons, because the prisons were actually bursting at the seams. But it probably was a launching pad for the transportation vessels, New Zealand, Australia, whatever. But after that, a letter came from the judge again to the Home Secretary saying that he'd had communication with magistrates in Norwich who'd been investigating the corner, and with other evidence he got, he believed now that there was no case to be answered by the Shepherds at all, and he recommended a free pardon. So that was April 16. No, July, that was July 2nd. So they did May 17, transportation, June 3rd, they went to Portsmouth, and July 2nd, letter of pardon. July 5th, Home Secretary wrote to the Superintendent of Convicts of all the prison halls saying that much. 2 days later, they were freed. And 5 days later, they were back to Norwich. It's a long way, no trains. Whether they went by ship or what, we don't know. Maybe they had ship when they were coming down. And the local newspaper, the Norwich Mercury, on the following Saturday, printed on Tuesday arrived in the city, John and Harvey Shepherd, the 2 men convicted at the last spring assizes of having some yarn in their possession, stolen from Charles Green, the carrier who was to receive the sentence of death. Afterwards, a commutation of punishment for hard transportation to life. John for 7 years, both of whom His Majesty has been pleased to grant pardon. And I always thought that British justice in Ireland was just because we were Irish, Catholic, and they wanted to repress us. But it's not the case. These severe penalties were meted out for everyone. If you did any transgression, you paid for it with your life, really. So, but the judge was fair and got them off and followed it up. And a bit more about him. There's a cross section I got of one of these prison halls. 4 or 5 decks. People crammed in. On the land side, all the portholes blocked off so they couldn't. They're full of rats, full of everything. The condition, there's lots of good written about it, horrible things. And I came across this painting of a row of prison hulls. So the city's in the background, these old dilapidated things all lined up. And there are 3 similar type paintings. One of them is in the British Naval Museum. I think it's in Greenwich. And then there are regular ships in the background. Maybe these are the ones taking transportation. So the information that I came across, again, it was suggested by Ancestry, but it's all there. British Home Office records, Prison Commission records, Prison Hulk registers and letters, they were present. It's like a roll book almost, how they behaved, and particularly for the Levethian register. UK criminal records, criminal entry books, criminal petitions. This last thing here has a file of 44 pages, all the letters of petition back and forth, and including a very detailed transcript that the judge took of the trial, writing down everything that everyone said, so he wasn't asleep on mine. And those transcripts were useful because they gave interesting information about the Shepherd family from witnesses who had to give evidence. Their father, William, was a weaver and was still alive at the time of the trial. That's the only thing I know about him. He wasn't dead. Both the Shepherds wove silk as well as wool, I think. Hardy Shepherd owned a shop, and 3 people mentioned things that they get on it: bread, tobacco, light ale. It was a female servant fetching it for her master or mistress. Hardy Shepherd worked his loom downstairs, not sure if it was in the back room or in where the shop was, and John, the brother, worked his upstairs. Don't know if the families lived in these houses with them or not. What happened next? Well, John Shepherd had 2 more children with his first wife. Then he married Mary Carmen and had Eliza and Shannon. Isn't it look for somebody in the room that they weren't hanged? He continued as a silk weaver in Norwich because he's on the later census, reporting that he's a silk weaver. And I think he died in 1881. I don't have the record. Irish civil records are freely available through Irish genealogy, but English ones won't. On Ancestry, you get a reference, an index to where the record is, and then you can send an email and send £5 or £10 or whatever it is. But if you've got the wrong one, you've got to do it again. But I think this is the right one. His wife, Mary, moved and lived with her son, Clement, in London, because she done the 1881 census. But I think she died that same year as well, too. What happened to Hardy Shepherd? Well, he had 2 more children with his wife, Mary Webster. Continued to work as a silk weaver because he's in the 41 and 1841 to 1851 census. He then moves to Wellington, New Zealand, with the daughter that I mentioned earlier, Matilda Mary Shepherd. She married Lewis Brown in 1851 in England, but there's a child born in 1858 in New Zealand. So sometime in that 4-year window, he went to New Zealand. Hardy Shepherd's wife, Mary, died in Wellington in 1870, and he died 4 years later at the daughter's house, Brown's house. And it was well publicized in the press. Both the short obituary and the notice of when the funeral was taking place appeared for 3 or 4 days in a row in the paper. So This Brown owned a hotel near Wellington. So maybe that's it. So that's there, the two notices in the New Zealand Times. That's what they call the Wellington newspaper. The criminal notice: procession will leave the residence of his son-in-law, Mr. Lewis Brown, 2 p.m. on Friday. And then underneath it, the obituary: 23rd instance, the residence of Lewis Brown, Mr. Ralph Hardy Shepherd. Ralph Hardy Shepherd is an unusual name. I don't think there can be any doubt, but this has to be right. And it's fortuitous and unusual. Where were we? There's Wellington, the tip of the top, bottom tip of the top island, as opposed to the bottom tip of the bottom island that not Savannah Down people will know, but everyone might. There's an Australian connection as well that I put in. I found that. A grandson of Ralph Hardy Shepherd seemed to be a bit of a bio. He was born in London, in Whitechapel, and he arrived in Queensland when he was 15. He worked his way on farms and other things, and seemed to be very diligent. Eventually worked his way up and made enough money to buy a really large cattle station, as we call it, or a cattle farm, called Millrace Station. He seems to be a big cheese. He was the chairman of the local county council, and he represented the council on the Townsville Harbour Board, and the family is still in Australia, other than down to. It's difficult to see, you can't really see live people on Ancestry, but if you look at, you can get an obituary for the previous generation, you sometimes get all the children. And he's even got his obituary in the James Cook University Archives. So they must have regarded him as a bit of a big cheese. He lived to a ripe old age. It's a longer article with a photograph, but his quality is very poor. So this is the Townsville Daily Bulletin, 1953. Arthur Shepherd buys the years 91 this month, 1953. The joyful news was, it's a boy, on August 4, 1862, when Arthur Shepherd of Millrace in the Pentland district, that's in Australia, first saw the light of day on the Isle of Wight. Now, after a long lifetime of work and achievement, he remains in North Queensland, enjoying the 90s, which he has so resolutely joined. Very good, thank you. So, yeah, he lived a good old life, but it looks all right. Little license taken where he was born. He wasn't born in the Isle of Wight, as far as I can see, but he projected this image of being a sailor and hadn't been in the high seas. So it's a good place to start. Have I the right family, or have I just been wasting my time? Well, I think I do, for 3 reasons. The first is interesting. I was doing out the family tree one night, and I said, this Clement Shepherd daughter married a guy called Wardrobe. And she said, wardrobes. Because as a child, Bessie had told her a little bit about collection. So she obviously knew something about family. Family called Wardrobe, but as a young girl, she thought the family's name was Wardrobe. And it's not. But as well as that, there are 2 DNA matches, 2 women, both of whom are great-great-granddaughters of interesting people. The first one is great-great-great-granddaughter of Matilda Shepherd Brown, the woman, the daughter of Ralph Hardy Shepherd, who went there in New Zealand. And the other is a great-great-great-granddaughter of James Shepherd, and a different son, Ralph Hardy Shepherd. And as far as I can see, that family still lives in Norwich, because the last few obituaries and things. In fact, actually, census, in England, they collect voter registration stuff even up to the 1970s and 80s. We're not giving, but to give the address, so I think I know who this person is, and put the name on, and they're living just outside of Norwich. So, a few concluding remarks. This all came down to just realizing the detail that there was an address on a marriage record, and perhaps an unusual name, down to detail. There's a bit of detail in this. This is a family photograph for Charlotte, who married the photographer. And it's a Christmas scene, and it's one of a lot of photographs. Bessie was a hoarder. She has postcard collections from people. But she has old photographs. All these old photographs are hers. And when Pat's second cousin came visiting last year, we showed her the photograph, and she said, "Oh, I recognize that tea set. I have it." So this is about 1922, and she was back visiting again last week, and she brought her with us. So that's the tea set. So the people in this, that's Charlotte, the daughter who went to England. That's the husband photographer. That's the oldest sister Marion who didn't marry. And when Pat's grandparents got married, I guess she got booted out of the house or suggested she be, so she went to live with them. And that's their two children. He became an Anglican priest and moved to Australia to Perth. What's the place? Fremantle in the 1950s. Not long after, the father died and the aunt died. And the mother went with them in children. He died and raised there. The two children, the other one and daughter is a sister, and it's her daughter who came visiting us. She was a nurse. This flamboyant lady in England is a friend of the family. They came to, and I'll show a photograph, they came to Cornu a few times. Bessie knew her as Miss Toft. Now, I think she lodged with them sometime. Her father was quite a well-known sculptor in England. She's certainly having the whole photograph there on it. And they did come to visit it. And what's amazing is that with all this interaction, they obviously knew about the shepherds, because Bessie knew about the wardrobes. But there was nothing going back. It seems to me there was a deliberate ploy to not say anything about what went on. So there's the same Charlotte, the flamboyant Miss Top, an older Ernest now, and an older sister, and
my uncle.
That's uncle Nicky Grove, and I don't know, I'm not quite sure how the person is. Unanswered questions. How did it? She was a dressmaker in marriage, Eliza Shep. How did she come to Mother Day between 1861 and 1871 in her 20s? Possibly worked with the French, but in what capacity? And how did they connect? A lot of the shepherds moved to London and lived there. So maybe she moved to London and the French met her there. The previous generation, Robert French, in the 1700s, established a linen industry, and that's how Monaville actually got built up. And the big white green, if you know it, in the middle, was a bleach green for hanging out or stretching out the linen cloths, bleached and white. It didn't last. But I wonder if it was through that fabric connection that he had connections in marriage. He got this woman. I might get a few answers. There are some of the French estate records in the National Library, and there might be some answers there. So records. This was really about records and was following trails of records, not knowing anything. Ancestry.com is a paid one that I've used to get in at the records. FamilySearch.org is the Mormon site that's free and has a bit too. The other paid one, My Heritage, we don't use a lot. Irish Civil Records is free. You get everything up to about 50 years ago for deaths and births. Births 100 years, marriages 75 years, and deaths 15 years. British Civil, well, you can get church records then, Catholic records at the National Library, but you have to mull through them, and it's a mess. Where you can get a paid subscription to Roots Ireland and they transcribe them all. British records cost. On Ancestry, you just get a reference number and then you pay button trying to find it. English church records are really good. They do go back to the Middle Ages, and you can get a lot there. And looking at people on my own side of the family, the Catholic Diocese of Liverpool also has really good births, marriages, and death records, which is unusual for Catholic records. To say that someone was buried in this plot in the Catholic area. So that's quite good for some of us. And there's lots available on British Home Record. The British Home Office, that's mostly about criminals or other petitions. But you can get that through the search engine.
They wouldn't be wanting to be looking at that.
And that's it. And I'm sorry, I didn't look at the time. So thank you very much for your attention. And for those of you still listening in, I apologize that I didn't have the microphone on for a while. So if there's any questions, I don't know if the sound is on here. If there are any questions on Zoom or any questions here, I'll try and answer them. Everybody's happy.
So much work.
Well, but most of the work was just from one observation and then trying to figure out how it was. The observation was that Charlotte Crowe said that she was living at 48th Lausanne Road when she was married, and it just happened to be close to a census. So the uncle was still, Clement was the uncle, he was still living there. And being a policeman, I suppose it was easy to identify. The other thing that made it easy was having a person called Ralph Hardy Shepherd. It's a very unusual name. If it hadn't been for that, if it had been Tom Murphy or Gerry Morgan, it could be one of the gazillion people. And in fact, looking at it first, I said, no, they're different shepherds. But when I looked at it, so it really was fortuitous. And then it was just a question of following the links. And it actually wasn't very difficult, because once you got one with the census ones working back every 10 years, you were looking for something specific. You weren't searching. Well, it just fell out. That just fell out of Ancestry. I didn't go looking for them. These were suggestions that were made, and Ancestry had the first. But I looked at them, and the newspaper. Now I have a subscription for the newspapers, so I could see those. So they did talk about when they were tried, and when they came back, and then I think when it was the death sentence was commuted.
They were not guilty.
No, they weren't guilty. They were involved in the committee, but they were deemed guilty by association, and they nearly got hung for being guilty by association, were it not for the judge.